What's going on YouTube? It's Teach back again with another video, and today I'm reacting to Pro Football Network's latest mock draft, or at least as the time I'm recording this on Thursday evening, right before the Rams-Seahawks game. Excited to watch that. This is their latest mock draft, and it's done by Ben Rolfe, so credit to him on all these selections. I haven't looked at it. I'm excited to do it, and I wanted to bring y'all some draft content, give you some updated thoughts on some of these prospects in this class and where teams are lying. But with that said, hopefully you all enjoyed today's video, and if you do, please hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want more draft football content in general, hit that big red subscribe button and comment your takeaways from this PFN mock draft. Tell me where you think some players are maybe a little bit of a reach, maybe they're falling a little bit, and tell me what you think about my analysis as well. Tell me your favorite prospects as well. Let's just talk about this NFL draft class down in the comments section. So without further ado, let's jump into it. He's got Sam Howell and Malik Willis in the top 10. And a nice little teaser there. Number one pick, Kayvon Thibodeaux. And the Jags feel like one of the worst teams in football right now. And they're one of the last two winless teams. Kayvon Thibodeaux definitely makes a lot of sense, especially considering K'Lavon Chaisson just has not panned out. I don't necessarily think Urban Meyer in this tenure has gotten out to a great start. Obviously, you have the whole, girl dancing on him at the club and a myriad of apologies, but even just before that, this organization didn't feel like it was getting the culture shift you thought with Urban Meyer, and I thought that would be the case, and I thought K'Lavon Chaisson was in for a big year under DC Joe Kelly, but it just has not happened, at least not yet. So some edge help opposite of Josh Allen would definitely go a long way for this team long term, and that leaves Derek Stingley Jr. going number 2 to the Detroit Lions, and I really like this fit, whether it's Kyle Hamilton to be just a bigger, better, faster Will Harris, or Derek Stingley Jr., especially with Jeff Okudah tearing his Achilles. I thought Okudah was going to be in for a big year number 2 under DC Aaron Glenn, a guy who's done a lot of good work with some DBs down in New Orleans in his time as the DB coach. But Okudah did not look good when he was out in the field. Then he gets hurt in an Achilles injury. If you're a basketball fan, you know those are just detrimental. Even if you're a football fan, you know that all the same. So it looks like Detroit's still looking for CB1. I think Kyle Hamilton should be in consideration there. So that definitely makes some sense. I like that way of thinking. And then we get to the Jets with Drake Jackson, man. See, Jackson is one of those guys who looks like an NFL caliber edge rusher. If you saw my big board, the first one I've done so far through this draft process, Drake Jackson looks like an NFL edge rusher, and he has all the traits, checks all the boxes just from the eye test. But the production's just not there. At the time of me doing that big board, he didn't have a single sack on the year. Granted, that was only 2 or 3 games into the season. But if you're that good and you check all those boxes, the same thing that people have said about Najee Sanders just in the group of 5 level, I need to see Drake Jackson start put together that production. So honestly, I'd probably lean Aiden Hutchinson because I've seen the production and the athletic traits are just unbelievable. But edge here at 3 with Thibodeaux and Stingley off the board, I think that makes sense. DeMarvin Leal might be an interesting pick here too. He's a guy who probably then have to be 3-4 end, and what do you do with Quentin Williams there? But Leal's a really special player, and maybe he's in the mix here, but I'd probably go Aiden Hutchinson over Drake Jackson, but I don't necessarily hate the pick because Jackson has all those traits, and he could be a guy who develops into an elite edge rusher. Eagles going Evan Neal. This is another Kyle Hamilton spot to me, or honestly, corner. I mean, the Eagles have a couple of picks, and this is the one from Miami. Obviously, a lot higher than we thought it would be just a few months ago. I know this offensive line's been battered and bruised throughout the early portions of this season. Jordan Mailata, one of those players, but he looks like a future left tackle in the making. Andre Dillard's actually not been terrible. They do need some help on the interior. You draft Landon Dickerson, this guard center, flexible interior offensive lineman, but he has his injury history. If you're taking Neal here for Philadelphia, you're saying you're playing him at guard, which I don't know if you want to spend a top 4 pick on an interior offensive lineman. Even Quentin Nelson was the 6th overall pick, so I'm not entirely on board here. I'd probably go Hamilton, but Evan Neal's a blue chip player in this class, so at the same point, I can't really knock it. And then we get QB1 here, and Sam Howell in this PFN mock draft. Very much up in the air. I totally agree. Howell has those special throws, and he's got unbelievable arm talent. And, in a situation where he could go to Atlanta and sit for a year behind Matt Ryan, might be the best thing for him, get acclimated with the speed of the NFL and learn from a guy who's had a lot of success. Howell's a little bit more mobile than Matt Ryan, but still has that big arm, want to throw the ball down the field. I think it fits the offense pretty well, so it's an interesting thought there. I think at this point, Malik Willis, in my eyes, I think a lot of other people's eyes, is QB1 just given his upside with his athletic ability and his arm strength. But Hal, if you still see him as QB1, don't hate him going to Atlanta at number 5. Sean Rhyan. Not a name that I've done a whole lot of research on, and obviously we're still really early on in the process, and offensive tackles are one of the positions I scout last because it's a little more cut and dry. But that said, this is a little interesting. No consensus OT1. I don't know about that because to me, Evan Neal is a clear-cut OT1 blue chip left tackle ready to go day one. But maybe outside of that, I could see there being a discussion between maybe Ryan, Jackson Kirkland, Petit Friere from Ohio State we'll talk about here in a little bit, I'm sure. That said, the Colts could definitely use a left tackle of the future. Eric Fisher's on a 1-year deal, so I don't hate this. I'd maybe just lean towards someone like Kirkland or maybe Kenyon Green. Definitely, I think, could play left tackle at the next level. If not, he'd be an awesome guard for sure. So, I'm not sure about Sean Rhyan here, but offensive tackle, if the Colts are picking at 6, I think is in play. Also, cornerback should be in consideration there. And then we get the Houston Texans taking Malik Willis. And hey, worked out drafting a dual threat guy and Deshaun Watson. Obviously, it looks like he's not going to be a part of the long-term rebuild in Houston. Malik Willis could be a guy that Houston's going to be a few years away, and Willis might need a few years to really hit his strides and fit in at the NFL level. But dude's an unbelievable athlete. Has the arm strength to throw a football through a brick wall, it feels like. You just need to refine the accuracy. So I don't hate this because Texans are as early on in a rebuild process as it gets. So take a guy who's going to take a few years to mature as an NFL player and really become a better player overall and become a franchise quarterback. He's got to grow into that, especially throwing the football. But Texans are a team that will have plenty of time to have him mature in that area. So I don't hate that pick whatsoever. Kyle Hamilton falls to 8. And I know it's crazy to say this because he's a safety, but I think 8 might be lowballing where he's going to go because this dude is just a freak of nature, 6'4", 215 plus. He's going to run around the 4-4, maybe even faster. I mean, he's just all over the field. He's a playmaker, whether it's helping the run game, being a box safety, or it's as a deep, cover 1, cover 3 safety, reading the QB's eyes, making plays down the field. I mean, he is the complete package. It's just unfortunate he plays safety, and that's kind of a devalued position. But not for New England, right? And if you were to tell me you could have Devin McCourty continue to play at a high level for another year or two, move on from Adrian Phillips, and maybe it's Kyle Duggar filling in that spot, and then Kyle Hamilton is this do-it-all, versatile chess piece for Bill Belichick. I wouldn't necessarily say safety is their biggest need, but that's a fit in a situation I'd love to see play out on the gridiron. So I'm not knocking it. If it wasn't Kyle Hamilton, I think wide receiver makes a ton of sense here. Wide receiver 1 for right now is still Chris Olave in my eyes, but Garrett Wilson certainly in the runnings. Treylon Burks, has had some big games other than the Georgia one, of course. Nobody looked good for Arkansas on that one. And then outside of that, cornerback, right? Stephon Gilmore just traded to Carolina. You might need to get CB 1 or 2, depending on how much you like J.C. Jackson if they re-sign him. But don't hate the idea of Kyle Hamilton with Bill Belichick. That would be a really interesting one. And so earlier the Eagles go Evan Neal, I guess, to patch up the interior of the offensive line. And now they go Kyrie Elam, who's my CB2. Elam is just unbelievable. He's been great this year for Florida. Has that mix of size, physicality, speed, and then just natural coverage ability. There's not much that you could really say about Kyrie Elam that isn't really good, right? He's just naturally somebody who is easy to compliment because he does so much right. It's just a shame that Devin Stingley Jr. is just a once-in-a-half-decade type of cornerback prospect, maybe once-in-a-decade type of cornerback prospect, and therefore Kyrie Elam kind of gets nudged down to CB2. Elam, in a lot of ways, feels like the CeeDee Lamb of the cornerback position where, and some people still had CeeDee Lamb as wide receiver 1 a couple years back, but if not for this awesome prospect in Jerry Jeudy, or you could even look at last year, Devonta Smith, wide receiver 2 to Jamar Chase, now just with the cornerback position, Kyrie Elam's going to be a stud. And if the Eagles took him at 9, that's your long-term answer at that position. And someone who can play opposite of Darius Slay, Steven Nelson, remember, on a 1-year deal, makes a lot of sense to me. I'd really like to see that. Giants go George Karlaftis. So still no Aiden Hutchinson. I'd go Hutchinson for sure over Karlaftis, just given the athletic traits. But that said, the Giants could use another edge rusher opposite of Azeez Ojulari, who has looked pretty good. And that's about one of the last few weaknesses on that defense. I know the secondary hasn't played all that well, and that still might be a group you want to address, but secondary play and defensive production overall can be just so variable. Right? Like, it just varies week by week, and it is very matchup based. So that can be kind of tough, but getting some pass rush help will certainly go a long way to helping that secondary look that much better. And there is talent on the back end. So if you were to get Karlaftis playing opposite of Azeez Ojulari, and you had Leonard Williams there in the middle with Dexter Lawrence as well, I'd like the idea that, I'd go Aiden Hutchinson here as well. But I think Karlaftis is a first-round type of edge rusher nonetheless. Andrew Booth Jr., CB3 here. Booth is probably CB4, maybe 5. I really like Trent McDuffie. And Roger McCreary from Auburn's climbing up boards a lot too. But Booth and McCreary are probably Booth 4, McCreary 5. But, we're still early on, obviously. But Booth Jr. is, this cornerback class in general is going to field 5 to 6 easy first-round caliber corners. And I'm not even thinking about Ahmad Gardner. Ahmad Gardner might be my CB3 or 4, actually. But Booth Jr. has all the skill sets to be a clear-cut cornerback number 1. Patrick Peterson's getting old. Rashad Breeland is a literal burnt piece of toast at this point in the season, and Cam Dancer, for whatever reason, isn't seeing the field. I think he's hurt right now, actually, going into week 5 of the season. So, that said, cornerback has to be something that they're looking at for the long-term answer. They're also probably looking at quarterback, and, they had eyes on Justin Fields. Maybe if Malik Willis fell this far, that would be a really interesting situation. I know they just took Kellen Mond, but it's Kellen Mond. That's obviously a wild card. So if you had a chance to get someone you liked in the first round, make a lot of sense. Also, edge has to be in play here. Daniil Hunter might be gone after this year, and even if you keep him, he's really been your only pass rush threat on the D-line. Maybe some for Michael Pierce as well. But overall, edge and corner, definitely the biggest needs here for Minnesota in the first round. If you're not looking quarterback, speaking of quarterback, Carson Strong to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would love to see this fit. Strong, somebody who has a strong arm, no pun intended, and who can really stretch the field. He's not super mobile, so for Pittsburgh to make this work, and I think it's a situation where they could make this happen, especially if they did bring back Juju and James Washington. Probably not likely. They only probably bringing back one of them. But that said, if they could just go full spread and completely depart from what we're seeing over the past couple of years, 3 wide receivers, your 11 set all the time, or a lot of times using 4 wide receivers, and just having Carson Strong go vertical, and then using someone like Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster in that horizontal passing game, working left to right and trying to create some open space underneath and in intermediate areas of the field, that'd be really interesting, and that would open up the field and allow you to get the most out of Carson Strong's arms. So really like the idea of this. Strong hasn't totally climbed up the board like I thought he might by this point in the year. Maybe it just takes some more time, but he was a guy who I said would be this year's Zach Wilson, small school guy who could fly up to be quarterback 1 or 2 in a lot of people's eyes, and I still like him a ton. He's one of my favorite players to watch in this draft class. Miami Dolphins, Nicholas Petit-Frere. I think it's Frere. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, Miami, it's safe to say that's been their biggest weakness this year, and it's held them back a ton. That and then Tua Tagovailoa being hurt doesn't help either. But yeah, they need to address the offensive line. And at this point, they need to allocate as many resources into that group as possible. Just throw darts and hope you eventually can find an answer. Because once this team can figure out the offensive line, it'll help the running game. It'll help Tua get those wide receivers healthy. As of right now, there's a lot of injuries in that area. But we're talking about next year. They can have a healthy wide receiver core. The defense is already really good. This team will then be ready to compete. Jets back on the clock. Kenyon Green. This would be interesting in the sense that you just drafted Elijah Vera Tucker. You just traded up to take him in the first round last year. Already have Mekhi Becton. And I think Kenyon Green's going to be a left tackle of the future. He's played guard. And now he's playing over at tackle for Texas A&M. So has some flexibility. Maybe you could kick him over to the right side. Maybe you could do that with Vera Tucker. And, we've seen some players have some struggles moving from the left to the right side this year. That said, patching up the offensive line and trying to keep Zach Wilson upright, and Kenyon Green does look to be a guy who's going to be ready to make that jump to the NFL level in regards to pass protection. So I don't hate that idea, but you went edge earlier. I'd love to see you go corner. Go get Ahmad Sauce Gardner or go get Trent McDuffie here. I don't think it's too early at 14 for either one of those two guys, but going offensive line, not a terrible idea. Saints go Chris Olave, and this would be awesome to see. I'm not a Saints fan by any stretch, but I think Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson would be a good fit, but I think Chris Olave is that big play, downfield, crisp, deep route runner with Michael Thomas being slant boy, not in a derogatory way, but like the guy who works the shallow and underneath stuff, and then you have Olave stretching the field. That would be such a nice compliment to one another. And then you have Traquan Smith and Marquez Callaway in the mix as well. And then, whoever the quarterback is next year for New Orleans, it's just that much more weapons to work with, and it makes that offense a lot more explosive than it is in its current state. Back to the New York Giants, Tyler Linderbaum. I think Linderbaum if I could put him on one team right now, it would be the Giants. So they went edge and they went interior offensive line. I think that's the direction they're going to go. I'm feeling more and more comfortable, and I feel like it's more and more likely that Daniel Jones stays for year 4. And I think he's played really well this year, which I didn't imagine me saying at this point in the season, and things could obviously change. But if you take Tyler Linderbaum, he's probably a center only, but what he can do in the running game helps Saquon Barkley. He's not necessarily an unbelievably good pass protector, but he is solid, and he will continue to get better in that area. And then also what he can do football IQ wise, line shifts, those sorts of adjustments at the line of scrimmage makes it all the easier. I think back to the Cowboys when they had Travis Frederick, Zach Martin as prime, Tyron Smith was staying healthy. It was the best offensive line in football, and it wasn't necessarily close. Then there was that one year Travis Frederick had that really scary neck injury, and he missed the entire year, and they went from being great to just, pretty good. And then he came back, and they were the best offensive line in football again. And a center can kind of have that effect, despite it not being something that's super overvalued. So in this mock draft, you see the Giants go edge, then center. I think that's their 2 biggest needs as of right now, and I would love to see them go in that direction in next year's draft. We're now on to the back half of this mock, and well, it's kind of weird to see Kansas City picking at 17, but if they did and they got Aiden Hutchinson, oh my gosh, this would be one of the biggest steals in my eyes, at least as I see it right now. I mean, just an athletic freak. Kansas City needs edge rush help. They also need some cornerback play, so they really can't go wrong here if they keep their first-round pick and decide to make that selection next draft. And if they got Aiden Hutchinson, that would be just phenomenal. Then you can kick Chris Jones back inside, or you can keep him on the edge. I kind of like the idea of Chris Jones as like a third down passing situation edge rusher. The Ravens picked on him a little bit, running options against him and putting a 310-plus pound man out in space trying to keep up with Tyson Williams or Lamar Jackson. Not really his territory to succeed in, but in passing situation, I think he's done a decent job, more than a decent job. He's done a good job. And if you were to put Aiden Hutchinson on the other side, that would make it really tough for opposing offenses to try to keep up with everything Kansas City does on the offensive side. So I think it would be a steal if they got Hutchinson. Garrett Wilson to the Browns. This would be interesting because it might signal the end of the OBJ era. Like, coming off of the week we just saw where they played Minnesota, Baker didn't look good in general, but he flat out missed OBJ for a touchdown. And that chemistry just still doesn't seem to be there. And it's super weird and bewildering just in general. And maybe it's because, OBJ's missed a lot of time because of injury, and they just haven't gotten their timing and chemistry down to 100%. That could certainly be in play. But the fact it continues to linger, and every year we hear these, is OBJ going to be traded this year? Is he out of Cleveland? Are the Browns going to move him? All that, it happens every year. It happens every week of the season. So they went Garrett Wilson. One, awesome. Upgrade over Rashad Higgins and Donovan Peoples-Jones, despite those 2 players not being bad by any stretch. But you have a little bit of an insurance clause if you do decide to move on from OBJ, but also OBJ has injury history. Jarvis Landry does as well. So it's just a nice flexible piece there. And Garrett Wilson's 6'3". He's got burners. I really like him in that offense, especially off of play action. You could do a lot of scary things with Garrett Wilson for Cleveland. Christian Harris goes to the Titans, right? This makes a lot of sense to me. Jayon Brown's back on a 1-year deal, and he could make a favorable replacement. Actually, I've been updating my mock draft, and this is, as of right now, what I have slated to the Titans because Christian Harris is so good as a blitzer up the middle. So even if they bring Jayon Brown back and they decide to move on from Rashad Evans out of Alabama, who also was a linebacker who figured to blitz well, and he comes from Alabama, it's kind of weird. But Harris is a proven, really quality edge rusher, or pass rusher in general. Actually, I think PFF has now moved him over as an edge rusher, which is crazy, but that speaks to how good he is. And we've seen this defense continue to have a hard time creating pressure. They just had problems not being able to create pressure against the Jets offensive line, I beg your pardon. So maybe you need to do it in a different way and do it by like the old school Steelers way where they blitz the middle linebackers a ton. Christian Harris, if that's what you want to do with him, he would bring a lot of success and would help generate that extra pass rush this team is having a hard time creating. Washington football team, Ahmad Sauce Gardner. I think this is a really nice selection here. This back 4 has really struggled. I think safety would be an interesting spot here because, one, Landon Collins he can't do it in coverage anymore. You might as well just make him a linebacker. He might be better in that spot than John Bostic because he's been picked on a ton in coverage as well. But William Jackson III's had his struggles. So has Kendall Fuller. And like I said, Landon Collins just is not a good coverage safety anymore. I don't know if he ever really was, but Ahmad Sauce Gardner would certainly help that quarterback group. You could kick Fuller back inside of the nickel where he's had a ton of success. You hope for a bounce back year for someone like William Jackson III. Play Cameron Curl a little bit more. and maybe some Jeremy Reeves a little bit more as the over-the-top free safety. I think that's how you start to patch up that secondary, because the pass rush is winning, but the cornerback and secondary play overall has just been really bad, and the opposing teams been able to get the ball out quick against them, so it negates how good the pass rush has been. Bills get DeMarvin Leal. I don't see him falling to 21. It feels like a lot of mock drafts have him falling to the back half of the first round. I'm telling you, he's just too good, especially now that he's playing on the edge at A&M, and you don't think of him as a D tackle. It's not like Christian Barmore where he is a D tackle. Leal could do both. And yeah, he's not going 21. He's definitely going higher. At least if the draft were today, he definitely would be. He'd be a top 10 pick in my eyes. But I see him as a blue chip guy, and if he landed in the Bills' lap, oh my gosh, that would be fantastic. They're already getting great play from A.J. Epineza. Gregor Rousseau's shown some promise. Have a couple of veterans that are still playing at a relatively high rate. Mario Addison's hurt right now, I believe, and then Jerry Hughes is still solid. But they could use some interior pressure next to Ed Oliver Jr., who hasn't totally taken that leap forward towards stardom that he was hyped up to potentially be coming out of Houston. And Leal could just be plug-and-play replacement there, or he could be someone who plays next to Oliver. And then that interior rush could be just as good as what the Bills are starting to build on the edge. So I'd love this selection. It'd be an absolute steal for Buffalo. Jordan Battle, this would be a nice selection here. And Battle's a guy who doesn't have anything super flashy. He makes me think, not only because they went to the same school, but he reminds me a ton of Xavier McKinney, where athletically speaking, no traits that jump off the page. He's not a guy who's going to run the fastest 40 or be insane with the 3-cone or even his vertical or anything like that. He's just a really smart football player and has a nose for the ball, puts himself in the right position, and just always seems to be in the right spot to make a play. And Carolina could use a guy over the top like that, right? They use Jeremy Chin a lot as this box safety. And they could use someone as a deep roaming, playmaking safety who, again, just has a nose for the football, put himself in the right spot. And this defense is already looking really good under DC Phil Snow. And if you had one more piece to it, a first-round pick, that would be really scary. Packers go Treylon Burks, and I'm glad he said it here. It'd be really interesting whether it's Burks or I've also seen Drake London given to the Packers at a couple of mocks as potential Devontae Adams replacements, right? Remember the contract extension talks were brought to a close. It's the final of the year, the deal for Adams. Rodgers looks like he's on his way out. This could be the quote-unquote last dance. So Rodgers might not be the only one leaving. So if Adams is gone, this team already needs another wide receiver opposite of Adams. But if he's gone, yeah, they desperately need help. And Burks, London, these two guys who definitely don't create as much separation as someone like Devontae Adams, but Devontae Adams, when it comes to creating separation, is bar none the best in the league. As of right now, him, Stephon Diggs, I mean, they make it look easy, at least how I see it. But Burks, 6'3", contested catch, really strong, makes a lot of sense as someone who could potentially be a Devontae Adams replacement, especially if you're starting completely over with the air and it's Jordan Love. You want to give him a wide receiver one. It makes some sense here at 23. Trevor Penning, offensive tackle out of Northern Iowa, starting to see him gain a lot of hype, and given his athletic profile, and he is coming from a small school, and he's starting to bloom at the right time. If you're a college prospect coming from a small school, he could be, like is said here, could end up being an offensive tackle. Maybe not one. I don't think he leaps Neal, but could be in that conversation for OT2, OT3. And here with the Bengals, you're saying, hey, Trevor Penning, we're going to take you, and maybe you play in at left tackle and you kick Williams inside to guard, Jonah Williams that is. I think Williams has been okay at left tackle, but he'd probably be better as a guard. That would work. Or Trevor Penning as your Riley Reiff replacement on the right side. And Reiff has not been anything special, anything to write home about. So that would also be in play. But the offensive line is certainly the focus there for Cincinnati. Wouldn't hate edge either if they went in that direction. Bucs take a tight end because O.J. Howard's on that last year of his deal, and you really need tight end 3 on the roster. Jokes aside, Jalen Weidermeyer, this is a really good tight end class overall. Weidermeyer's probably the only one who has a chance to go in the first round. I think he's definitely there, taken in the second round, if not in the first. But this is a really solid tight end class in the sense that you're going to get some good value in the mid to late rounds for guys who can be plug and play, nice receiving options. Maybe not plug and play in the sense they're going to be great as rookies, but on the rookie contract, they'll be able to make some impact, probably in year 2 or 3. We just don't normally see tight ends immediately hit the gridiron in year 1 and make a huge splash. But Weidermeyer, really like his game, fits what the modern NFL is looking like. You also have to take into account, like he's saying here, Gronk has had his injury battles throughout his entire career. He's also getting up there in age. He's only less than a year older than Travis Kelce, so that's kind of bewildering to think about. But Gronk's had his injury history, and Cameron Brate, not your long-term guy there. So Weidermeyer, jokes aside, wouldn't be the worst of picks for a team that has almost no holes on its roster. Lions get the pick from the Rams. They go Matt Corral. At this point, I think that would be an okay value. I don't think Corral was the biggest of problems against Alabama. I think he overall played not terrible. It's just a quarterback class for Detroit, especially if you get Derek Stingley Jr. earlier. Maybe you just want to go edge, right? Roman Aquara is out for the year. Trey Flowers is not your long-term answer. Julian Okwara is playing pretty good. Maybe you want to go linebacker here. Nakobe Dean, a true sideline-to-sideline linebacker from Georgia. If Leal falls to you here, some interior pass rush would certainly go a long way. Maybe a wide receiver. That would make a lot of sense here as well. I think they might end up waiting another year on the quarterback position and really build out the roster to where they're not quite where Washington or Pittsburgh is, but where the roster is in a good spot and a quarterback away from really starting to emerge. Kind of like where Miami was really when they drafted Tua, where it's like, okay, you're starting to see the dots line up here, and this team's going to be really good if they land a good quarterback, and we thought Tua was going to be that. Not quite. So I think the Lions might end up waiting a year, but Matt Corral at 26, I think that might be a solid value, and at this point, he's quarterback 4? I'm thinking this will be another year where we see 4 or 5 quarterbacks go in the first round. Monte Sanders to the Denver Broncos. It's tough because you might have to replace Von Miller. I don't know where Miller stands on wanting to go back to Denver. Additionally, if you re-sign Miller, how much money do you have to pay someone like a Aaron Rodgers if you're in that sweepstakes, or Deshaun Watson if you're in the running for that? That might become a cap casualty type of thing where if you get one of those QBs, you can't keep Miller, so therefore you go edge in the draft. And Monte Sanders is just an athletic freak. In a lot of ways, you can see some similarities to his game in Von Miller, but Von Miller also dominated in the Power 5. Monte Sanders starting to play better, but he's doing it in the group of 5. That's going to be something that gets talked about a lot in the draft process that holds him back from being someone in that Aiden Hutchinson type of talk right behind Kayvon Thibodeau, at least the way I see him. Rashad Walker, this is a nice, good athlete and someone who is a nice project, and the Ravens definitely need a right tackle of the future. I think Orlando Brown Jr. is going to be okay. He is a little banged up right now on the left side. But Alejandro Villanueva, it's a 1-year stopgap contract. Ideally, they signed him to play on the right side, but he hasn't looked all that comfortable over there, which makes sense because he's always been this, really nice pass-protecting left tackle. He doesn't do great in the run game, and now go into a team that is very run heavy and playing him on the right side. Didn't feel like the best fit, but I was happy to see Villanueva sign a contract in general. Rashad Walker might be a guy who becomes that true Orlando Brown Jr. replacement on the right side. And then, apologies if I said Orlando Brown Jr. struggled on the left side. Ronnie Stanley has been banged up on the left side. Ronnie Stanley he's a franchise left tackle. So with that said, if you have Stanley on the left side, Rashad Walker I think is a good worthy project for Baltimore to take back end of the first round and play him over at right tackle. Browns, Zach Harrison, I think they definitely need some edge. Randy Gregory last year of his deal, if I remember. It'd be interesting to see if they just dedicate playing Micah Parsons on the edge, even with DeMarcus Lawrence coming back relatively soon. I know they just cut Jalen Smith, but LVE, Keanu Neal, more and more teams are playing nickel as their base, right? You only need 2 coverage safeties out there. I'd be intrigued to see them use Micah Parsons, at least in passing situations, right? Maybe you want him as an off-ball linebacker, first and second down situations where you might see the other team run, but then passing situations, get his hand in the dirt opposite DeMarcus Lawrence. That's interesting. If you don't go that route, however, Zach Harrison, I think, is a worthy project. A lot like Drake Jackson. Looks like an NFL pass rusher. And he's actually put up some decent production. And he comes from a school that has just churned out edge rushers like no other, right? He is not the Bosa's and he's not Chase Young, but he's pretty good, and he's worthy of being in the first round as well. Chargers go Ekem Ekwonu. I think this would be a really nice addition to help the running game. Not that this is a team that's a run-first offense, but guard play hasn't necessarily been fantastic. They really need a right tackle. Storm Norton is getting picked on beyond all belief, but maybe that's a free agency type of signing, or maybe you get somebody here in the back end of the first round. But Ekem Ekwonu, I think, would definitely help out in the running game, and he's just going to be mean up front. And he's actually fared pretty well at left tackle this year for NC State, so maybe he does have some upside, and he could be a right tackle moving forward. But he's really gotten better, specifically as a pass protector, better than I thought he was going to be, at least at this point in the season for NC State. So helps in the run game, and you're starting to see that curve in the development as a pass protector as well, which will obviously help Justin Herbert. So I definitely don't hate that pick. Marion Winfrey, D tackle from Oklahoma. It feels like the Raiders for a while, for a couple of years now, I feel like I'm always mocking D tackles to the Raiders because I want to see them get that interior pressure to help out guys like Max Crosby and, at the time, Clelin Ferrell, but now it's Yannick Ngakoue and Crosby. And, if they got Winfrey, I think that would help out a ton. Nick Benito could be someone who's in play here. He's more of a 4-3 end than a D tackle. So Winfrey, the other Oklahoma Sooner, gets the edge here. Maybe a linebacker, could be looking corner as well, depending on if they can get Casey Hayward Jr. back, who's been a really nice signing this offseason. Offensive line could be in play as well, the interior in specific, but I don't hate the idea of going D tackle here and just patching up that defense, especially trying to help stop the run. And Kingsley Enagbare, edge from South Carolina, goes to the Cardinals. This is your potential Chandler Jones replacement if he goes here. But even if he's not, he's your Marcus Golden replacement for sure. And then I think they should re-sign Chandler Jones. And you're looking at a spot where you have a good young player in Enagbare learning from Jones, playing opposite of each other. And then in that 3-4 defense, J.J. Watt plays the DN spot, and he can have a ton of success helping stop against the run if he's healthy. And, of course, be a quality pass rusher. So, overall, don't hate that selection. Overall, I think this was a pretty solid mock draft. Had a couple things, a couple players I'd rearrange, but, it's anyone's taste, right? It's so subjective, especially early on in the process. But tell me what you think about this mock draft, and tell me what you think about my takes on this mock draft down in the comment section. Tell me some of your favorite prospects as well. I'd love to talk about some of these college football players and their potential leap to the NFL with you. Hope you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want more sports content like this, just hit that big red subscribe button. But that is going to do it for today's video. Hope you all enjoyed. Until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.